right, so today we have Gort Steves with us here from ABS Law. So we're talking about kind of divorces, separations. How do people sort of deal with like the beginning first steps of that?
Right, and it's a great question, and it's commonly misunderstood by people. When two people make the very difficult decision to separate in their lives, it sometimes can be a decision where they've just arrived at that decision and they're already thinking about their home, or sometimes it could be a situation where they've actually made the decision to separate a long time ago, but they've stayed living together and now they've decided they've got their affairs sufficiently in order where they can talk about moving the house as kind of a last step. So it depends on the process.
Well, like I find for me being a realtor, I find out before the other person finds out.
Oh boy, that's awkward.
So awkward.
That's awkward.
And so they come to me asking, what do I do? Like, how do I even begin this process? Because they think about their biggest asset and they're thinking about, possibly kids and other things like that. And where do they live? What do they do? How does, Yeah,
and again, always a tough one with clients, but our advice always is the exact same. Square up with your partner, right? Like just sit them down as hard, or her down, as hard as these things are, and they are incredibly hard. Yeah, ridiculously hard for
even
people.
The most amicable that I've ever seen are ridiculously hard.
Yeah, sit them down and sit her down and just say, look, okay, we're both adults here, and hopefully we can sort of work our way through this, because optimally, a huge mistake that people make, and you may not see this as much as a realtor, but we see it at our end a lot of the time, is they think about the house in isolation of every other asset, which makes it difficult for us because we're not in as early as you are. Like we're way after you sometimes before, sometimes after.
Yeah.
It's better if we're before because ideally, you're a divorcing and separating couple. What you want is them to be selling the house in the context of a full agreement on all assets and all debts.
Yeah,
which is a fundamental mistake that people make. We have people in here all the time who will come to us at the very end stages of selling their house or towards the end of it and say, we have an agreement. We're just going to split the money on our house. Fine, there's no difficulty with that, except for in the context of a dividing marriage, and a marriage that's breaking up. And everyone understands, right, that when a couple who's been together for a while separates, generally speaking, all of the assets and all of the debts are equally divisible. That includes the house.
Yeah. Now,
the problem is people don't necessarily always appreciate that the house is, well, it might be their biggest asset. Mm-hmm. It's certainly not their only asset. And they may well have debts, right, which are also divisible.
Yeah, and everything is all intertwined and So if people have a house worth $300,000 where you're selling for $300,000, there's a $200,000 mortgage, and let's say, for argument's sake, there's $100,000 worth of equity, just for simplicity. Dividing that house equity 50-50, $50,000 each, that might be the fairest thing in the world. It might work out perfectly. But if the wife has a line of credit that she's accrued in her name over the course of the marriage of $25,000, that too is divisible. So if that's the only other thing out there, then you can see how the 50-50 split doesn't really work very well. It's not fair, right? And the problem is, of course, once the money is gone, and there's no getting it back.
No, there isn't. I mean, well, I shouldn't say that. It's possible, but you've then got to go through the process, and unfairly, you've got a situation where one party has taken more than their fair share in the house, because it actually can get even more complicated than that, because if it's a situation of inequity in income. So if you have a husband and a wife, or I mean, it could be a husband and a husband and a wife and a wife, you bet. Because the rules are the exact same for any sort of gender combination of couple. There's no difference under the law, nor does it make a difference after 3 years whether or not they're married or common law. Everyone's treated the same. If there's a disparity in income, if one person's at $100,000 and one person's at $50,000, then, well, we all know what that means in the context of a separation, right? Spousal support or common law partner support. It's not at all uncommon for partners to look at the equity from their home, and one partner to say, well, I'm the partner that earns more money, and I am now aware that I would owe you spousal support. So we can work something out in terms of division of the equity of the home, where one party will take more. Yeah. So they'll say, look, I'm not going to worry about spousal support going forward, but I'm going to offset that legal right that I have as a lower income spouse. I'm going to offset that by a better equity split on the house that we're selling. So,
so many options.
There is so many options, right? And of course, if a couple shows up here at my desk or my boardroom to sign their final documents 4 days before closing, and now the odds are, if it's a split, normally you as a realtor would have brought that to our attention beforehand, but sometimes not, right?
Yeah.
And I suppose it's possible that, well, do you always know for sure that it's a split?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, right? It could be a situation where couples are doing this in contemplation of division. They don't want to tell you for whatever reason, and they certainly don't want to tell me. And candidly, I'm sure we've probably done deals, maybe you, maybe me, where people have gone through the whole process, and the couple themselves, they know that they're going their separate ways, but they don't share it with us, right? Which is, I guess, their call. Where it might cause problems, of course, is down the road when one party says, I've had a chance to list all the assets and all the debts, and my list of debts in my name comes to $100,000, and the list of debts in your names comes to $2,000.
Yeah.
So you owe me half of $98,000, right? And that would have been better dealt with before. Yeah. So to get back to where you want to be, if at all it's possible, you can bring in the couple earlier in the process and say, listen, if you're amicable, which is 90% of the battle. If two people are getting along, they're obviously not getting along, they're getting divorced, but if they're
able to enough to
yeah, that's right. If they can talk things through rationally, which isn't necessarily a foregone conclusion, but if they can do it, it's easy to set up a separation agreement, and a lawyer can do it. Well, a lot of lawyers can do it. Not every lawyer will do it because it's not something they do. We do it here at the office. And if we come to a separation agreement, we'll have to put the agreement in front of the people. One of the parties is going to have to sit down with a different lawyer from a different firm, right? So they can get their independent legal advice, and then everybody can have a chance in private to kind of talk to a lawyer away from each other. And that lawyer can advise the person and say, well, you're doing good here, maybe not as good here. You're giving away
some stuff. You make the changes, you go back and forth.
Yeah, and our experience has been that it's rare where a divorce and separation is a perfect 50-50. It's rare, right? Because oftentimes, one party will say, it's a divisible debt, but it's in my name. I know it was mine. Yes, for whatever reason. Exactly. Yeah. And they'll take it on, that responsibility, even though legally it's a different story, right? So if you can get to that point, you're in better shape, and you have the confidence of knowing that when the house proceeds come and when they're sold, I know, as one of the parties that's separating, I know that the deal I've got is either perfectly fair for me, maybe more than a little fair for me, or maybe a little less than fair for me. And the kids are good, and everybody's good, and we understand each other, right? Now, there's other issues, right, that come into play, particularly with kids. Right? You got to be careful of, right?
That's a whole whole another ballgame.
Oh boy, yeah. If we're fond of saying in our business, there's really two types of separations and divorces: one with kids and one without.
Right?
And it's not that people can't get along if they have kids. They do often. And the good news is the law has evolved to a point now in our society where I think the court has not legally defaulted to, but they've kind of morally defaulted to the space where every parent is equal. And ultimately, parents, when they're separated now, there's enough knowledge out there where people understand that, generally speaking, both parents have an equal right to time with their children if they want, right? Or if they're able to exercise it. So you've got to be careful of that. And with our new system that we have in courts here in Manitoba, it's made it a little more challenging for parties to get in front of judges quickly to sort of deal with some of these challenges that are more acute. So what often happens is people don't agree, but they still want to sell their house, right? So what do we do in circumstances like that, right? Where you as the realtor, you have two parties, and I guess there's times where probably you can't even talk to them together, right?
All the time.
Is that right? Yeah. So
yeah,
it's not even a situation where you're able to kind of speak to them together, and they don't get it. They haven't arrived at a consensus. They don't have that mutual respect and understanding, and they're not able to sort of get there. But both of them are often in trouble financially, or one of them can't stomach it, and that's why the house has to be sold, right? One person's got to go this way, the other person has to go that way. They cannot stomach the idea of living together anymore, and it has to end, and that happens often. In those type of difficult circumstances, what we do is we will get both the parties together, we'll canvass all options with respect to trying to arrive at a settlement, an agreement. If it's impossible, and there's a looming possession date on the sale of the home, or even if they want to take the active step of listing it with you and say, because we just can't do this anymore, we will say, we're going to sign an order to pay, we're going to sell the home, we're going to pay off all the encumbrances against the home, the mortgage. Sometimes the parties will say, okay, we also want you to pay off with the equity proceeds. We also want you to pay off this line of credit too, because that's strangling us. We're going to get rid of the mortgage, we're going to get rid of the line of credit, a credit card here, a credit card there if the equity exists. And if there's equity left over, we'll simply, on the order to pay, we'll simply establish we're going to hold the money in trust until such time in the future that they can come to an agreement.
And usually what I suggest to them is that you've each got your own lawyer helping you with the separation. Get a separate lawyer handling the real estate transaction, who then talks to the other two to figure out where the money's going.